The tranquil evening of the 23rd in the late September season was unlike any other, as a profound silence blanketed the dimly lit streets of Glasgow, 1954. A bitter breeze enraptured the ancient city, serving as a stark reminder of the rapidly shifting weather. Trees, ablaze with the fiery hues of autumn, lent an air of romance and mystery as their decaying leaves gently descended onto the damp ground below. Alone in his patrol car, Police Constable Alex Deeprose took a leisurely sip from his aromatic styrofoam cup, accommodating a blackened brew of liquid energy that would carry him through the sleepless night. In the neighborhood he had been assigned, all was still. Not a person dared brave the evening chill, nor a beast forfeit their bundled warmth. Everything remained perfectly serene. Embraced in the comforting warmth of his vehicle, Alex allowed his mind to idle, reflect on the past evening's events. The graveyard shift was far from exciting, yet it granted him repose, a moment to himself without the heavy weight of his superiors breathing down his neck, constantly encroaching upon his mind. It should have been a restful evening, a night of bliss, but seldom do the shadows bring about a sense of peace. Often, where the darkness creeps, malevolence is soon to follow. Interruption from his solitude was brought about by the radio firmly secured to his car's dashboard. A cry for assistance by a concerned citizen had sent the quiet evening's tranquility into a crescendo of alarm. Fire had burst to life in the nearby graveyard. Darting silhouettes had been spotted, surrounding the blaze. It was a scene of pure chaos that could not be abided. An offensive rupture of red and blue light filled the city streets as cruisers rushed to the site, Constable Deeprose being among the first to arrive. What awaited him sent his calm mind racing, the stern look on his face quickly fading to curiosity and concern. Children of all ages, some nearing adulthood and others still clumsily practicing their first steps, moved about the sanctuary in a panic, their ashen faces cutting through the Stygian night. Corralling the unruly horde of children proved difficult, their anxiety and hysteria emanating in the form of terror-filled screams. Constable Deeprose had no earthly idea why these children were in such a state, nor why an abundance of them were armed with wooden crucifixes, which they clung to as if their very lives depended on the symbols being near. As additional officers arrived on the scene, equally as confused by the carnival of horrors before them, Deeprose turned and directed his attention towards the raging fire rapidly swallowing the somber courtyard. Through the radiance of orange and red, dancing in tandem to a silent, destructive tune, he was able to collect a brief understanding of why these children were so terror-stricken, why they had assembled here in the gloom of the Southern Necropolis, and why they continued to bellow the same unnerving rhetoric. There, within the roaring blaze, only but for a brief moment, Officer Deeprose caught sight of the iron-toothed man who haunted the cemetery. Welcome back to another episode on the Moonlight Lore podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hopkins, and this is the story of the Gorbals Vampire. Within the stone confines of Glasgow, Scotland, one may be fortunate to find a rewarding and comforting life awaiting them. The vibrant energy that pulses through the metropolis and the lively melodies that waft along its welcoming streets often lure those in search for opportunity. Folks from all walk of life converge at its heart, hoping to discover their passions along the way. Yet many remain blissfully ignorant of the ominous history that occasionally seeps through the ancient stone cracks. If only they knew of the malevolent force that once haunted this tranquil and idyllic setting, one may think twice about calling the city their home. It's a closely guarded secret that the locals often neglect in sharing with inquisitive foreigners. Many had hoped to leave behind such horrors firmly tucked within the darkened halls of history, silently wondering if any such commotion has the potential to disrupt their modern lives once again. There are a few who dare drudge up events of the past, if only for a brief moment of adrenaline that accompanies such a frightful retelling. In truth, it's a narrative frequently overshadowed or even deliberately ignored. 70 years is a long time, allowing most to believe that all wounds have long since healed, prompting them to forget such harrowing events. There are those who ponder whether this tale ought to remain buried in the annals of history, destined for eternal obscurity, lest old wounds be opened. A handful of survivors are all that's left who still hold memories of that fateful night, and fewer still who take it upon themselves to safeguard its preservation. And thanks to these remarkable storytellers and collectors of yore, we're privy to the enduring legacy of the Gorbals Vampire, an indelible figure nestled within the chapters of Glasgow's extensive history. The question arises, however, how did this infamous figure first rise to prominence within the heart of Glasgow's Gorbals borough? How did this iconic, iron-toothed character command such dread and unease in the locals, despite never having been sighted before? Well, unraveling the answer to that question may prove more challenging than some might first assume. In truth, nobody knows how the rumor had first gained notoriety. The notion of a 7-foot-tall monster scouring the cemetery at night, preying on unsuspecting children who strayed into the hallowed grounds, seems implausible. Though, following the mysterious deaths of 2 of the local youths, more began to wonder, what could truly be lurking amidst the elongated shadows cast by the moonlight filtering through the clusters of headstones? To fully understand the situation, we must first journey back to the days preceding the event that unfolded on the night of September 23, 1954. It was during this time that a tinge of suspicion lingered heavily in the air, and paranoia began to seep its way into the susceptible minds of the local schoolchildren. They feared that the recent deaths of 2 of their peers were a result of the unhindered wrath of their undead foe, who stalked those entering its darkened domain. Apprehension wrapped their active minds that their lives would be forfeit should they ever enter the nearby necropolis. The early September season had swiftly ushered in the onset of natural decay, as filtering leaves, crisping and browning, fell from their branches, lending an atmosphere of mortality upon the ancient streets. As cold winds delicately danced among the headstones, with them they carried whispers of the past, unspoken warnings from those long since departed from this world. The Gorbals district, bearing the unmistakable mark of a bleak, unforgiving environment, was cast astray by the sinister black clouds that stifled the daylight. They draped across the sprawling sky above in shadows, emanating from the towering smokestacks that loomed over the neighborhoods. The factory's nightly emissions of burning embers painted the heavens in hues of orange and red, creating a stark contrast against the stone silhouettes in the graveyard, allowing them to sway and flicker as if moving on their own volition. The swiftly shifting and austere ambience provided fertile grounds for the young imaginations of the Gorbals to flourish, giving rise to dreams and nightmares featuring unknown monstrosities lurking in the dark. Word began to circulate through the grapevine of something amiss in the Southern Necropolis, a living, breathing devil. No one knew where this disconcerting rumor had originated, but what was indisputable was the sheer unbridled terror it instilled amongst the community. Despite no one having encountered or perceived this elusive entity, they still sensed its ageless presence bearing down upon the sanctuary, patient and relentless, its decaying souls standing ever vigilant over its domain, awaiting the arrival of fresh prey to wander in. Unfortunately, this posed a distinct challenge for the youth living south of the River Clyde, as avoiding the cemetery became an impossible undertaking. During this period, a severe shortage of green spaces for the children to play existed, primarily due to the immense overcrowding within the Gorbals. This scarcity was exasperated by the expansive presence of the Dixon's Blazes Ironworks, its foundry dominating the local area and notably, immediately adjacent to the Southern Necropolis. Consequentially, the children had no other alternative spaces to frequent, leading to hordes of them converging on the sanctuary following the end of their daily lessons. Though, despite the looming threat of the dreaded monster believed to scour the grounds after dark, they clung to a sense of safety as long as the sun continued to glitter in the sky above. However, the swift passage of time often eluded their awareness. Time tends to slip away when one is immersed in joyous fun, and many of the children frequently found themselves tempting fate as they disregarded the slowly descending sun. As their games dwindled, the realization would gradually set in. The roaring fires of the nearby ironworks bathed a warm hue onto the sea of headstones, birthing a fiery panorama reminiscent of the depths of hell itself. The town grew silent as the clang of metal resonated through the air, an ominous alarm signaling their undead adversary to rise from its slumber. Fleeing from the grounds, the local youth would nervously chuckle about their close encounter, playfully teasing one another of fear that had etched itself onto their ashen faces. To most, it seemed only like a game, a way to strike fear into their fellow playmates. But soon, following the suspicious deaths of two of their peers, they would realize it was anything but. Following up on the call he had received from dispatch, Officer Deeprose reached the Southern Necropolis, uncertain of the scene awaiting him beyond the stone archway that marked the entrance to the dead city. A concerned citizen had reported witnessing crowds of children converging at the gate not but a few moments ago, armed with an array of makeshift weaponry and marching into the sanctuary with a palpable sense of determination. The nature of their mission seemed to remain in the realm of reverie, as anyone from the outside looking in on their desperate plight would fail to understand the danger they faced. For those privy of their objective, they knew at that moment it had become the perfect time to strike, to gain revenge for their fallen friends. The nearby foundry's furnaces billowed puffs of thick smog cascading across the open sky. The sun was swiftly seeking shelter beyond the horizon, and with their substantial numbers, this fledgling army was bolstered with confidence. They would face their greatest fears that night and put an end to its tyranny once and for all. Leaving his patrol car, the constable peered into the deepening darkness beyond the archway. Shimmers of light and fleeting flashes illuminated his curious gaze as silhouettes moved swiftly from stone monument in a sudden fashion. Undoubtedly, the caller was correct. Children of all ages had descended upon the necropolis, though for whatever reason he could only imagine. With astonishment, he entered the open clearing, and what met his view revealed nothing but pure chaos. Hundreds of children swarmed the monuments, clambering over headstones, some wielding knives and torches. Near the gate where he entered, children stood guard, armed with wooden stakes and pikes, ensuring nothing supernatural could escape the grounds, while others diligently patrolled the gravesites, ensuring nothing could catch them by surprise. The ancient gnarled trees and the elaborate Victorian mausoleums all discovered life in them once more, as the souls of the youth scoured the scene, tempting their foe to reveal itself. Flames burst to life from behind the stone barrier separating the cemetery from the ironworks. A crescendo of burning metal echoed across the night sky, drowning out the shrieks and howls emanating from those believing they had caught sight of the undead. The obnoxious odor of sulfur drifted through the air, mixing with a rolling fog, its offensive scent permeating every nostril. As shadows danced and flickered through the grounds, as the fires burned and mist drifted, contorting every Stygian shape in sight, the children suddenly exclaimed they had sighted the iron-toothed vampire of the Gorbals and rushed into pursuit. Constable Deeprose stood in bewilderment, confronted by a scene unlike anything he had ever witnessed in his life. Never before had he ever encountered such complex chaos unfolding before his eyes. Children of all ages, from mid-teens to those who had taken their first steps only months earlier, were scattered across the necropolis, fervently pursuing something seemingly intangible. Approaching a few of the older ones to inquire about their unusual goals, the kids explained to him that they were on a violent hunt for the Gorbals Vampire, a monstrous figure standing 7 feet tall, wielding reflective metal fangs. According to their account, it had recently captured and consumed 2 boys who had found themselves in the graveyard after dark, and their current mission now was to ensure it could not strike again. As more officers arrived on the scene, equally as confused and concerned about the commotion unfolding that evening, they did their best to dissuade the eccentric group from continuing their enigmatic search. Though, despite their stern warnings, the children refused to end their nightly hunt. It wasn't until the local headmaster arrived at the yard and delivered his own version of a warning would the majority of the children finally cease their relentless campaign and call it a night. With a sudden downpour now drenching their clothing and turning the terrain to mud, only then did the last of the children realize their game of cat and mouse would have to wait. The Gorbals Vampire would live to see another night. The following evening, officers patrolling the neighborhood harbored a hope that the eccentric event of the previous night was a singular ordeal. That reason would prevail and the young minds inhabiting the Gorbals would realize there was no such predator lurking within the necropolis. However, such a scenario would fail to make headlines if that had been the case. In reality, the admonishments delivered to the children by their local headmaster, the officers on scene, and their parents later that evening had done very little to dissuade them of their determination. As the moon crept across the dark expanse once more, it again lured a full battalion of children to the cemetery, armed with their array of weaponry, ready to resume their pursuit. Similar to before, the growing disturbance alerted the locals of what was transpiring behind the walls of the sanctuary, and the police were promptly alerted to the volatile gathering. Night after night, the recurring scene unfolded in the Gorbals. Hordes of children would arrive en masse, converging at the gates of the Southern Necropolis in a desperate pursuit of the iron-fanged vampire that had never been seen, all the while prompting police intervention to disperse the growing crowd and clear the grounds of such mayhem. Over time, interest in the monster inevitably began to fade among the local youth, with fewer and fewer believing a successful hunt would manifest. The calamity gradually began to wane for the children, as such excitement is wont to do. Their attention drifted, their lives graduated towards more leisurely pursuits befitting their age. Peace and quiet would eventually return to the neighborhood. However, a sense of unease continued to quietly deepen its roots, this time in the matured minds of the adults. Concern over what the children had claimed to witness, the mysterious rumored entity responsible for the deaths of 2 youngsters, slowly permeated throughout the community. A festering fear took hold within the industrial, fiery heart of the Gorbals, as a sinister predator continued to assume its role as Glasgow's boogeyman. Concerned for the safety of their children, parents of the time earnestly inquired with the police about the validity of the legend, whether there was indeed a mysterious figure sulking in the darkest corners of the Southern Necropolis. The vivid descriptions of a blood-sucking monster so vigorously described by their children made it seem like a genuine menace, a tangible threat firmly rooted in the realm of reality. Many of the officers, such as Constable Alex Deeprose, experienced the chaos firsthand, but assured the anxious public that there was no credible cause for alarm. Throughout their cursory investigations, they had not once encountered such a deadly character, later emphasizing that the children's vibrant imaginations were simply running rampant. Though despite this reassurance, fear had already firmly gripped the community. Local news outlets in Glasgow, as well as national press from across the world, eagerly seized the story for their latest editions. The spellbinding tale held their devoted readers' attention, leaving much to the imagination due to the absence of proper answers explaining the cause for this phenomenon. People worldwide were enthralled by the charming adventures of these young Scots, fascinated by the idea of an army of armed children confronting an otherworldly adversary. However, the people of Glasgow held a rather conflicting attitude on the matter. While it was easy for outsiders to be enchanted by the narrative, those enduring the looming threat day to day saw it as a broader issue. They desperately sought answers, longing for a return to that sense of safety they loved. The question continued to linger. Where did those kids discover such a notion that a vampire had suddenly nestled within the heart of the city, preying on the vulnerable and inattentive? In the 1950s, uncovering answers to such inquiries surrounding this story might have been a bit of a challenge. Fortunately, over the years, there have been several sources who passionately debated what might have been the cause. Despite the alarming claims that the Gorbals Vampire had attacked and caused the disappearances and deaths of 2 innocent children, there are in fact no verified records of any murdered children around the time of the incident. This startling revelation appeared to be the catalyst for the entire notion of a monster hunt. So if this was merely a myth, why were the children so adamant in pursuing an unknown predator who seemingly had never been seen before nor committed such crimes? To unravel this question, we may need to delve further into the past when Glasgow's population experienced a sudden surge. Approaching the end of the 19th century, life in the Gorbals district was predominantly shaped by the rapid growth of industry. The belching black clouds from the towering smokestacks shrouded the expansive sky, casting elongated shadows over the neighborhoods below. The allure of heavy industry did well in drawing people in from across the country in search of employment, some of them arriving in the city with meager savings and far too many mouths to feed. Almost overnight, the entire area gained a disconcerting reputation as being one of the city's most poverty-stricken districts, fraught with poor sanitary conditions and overcrowding. As the years unfolded and the 20th century made its grand entrance, the people of Glasgow were confronted with a sudden and challenging chapter in their lives. In August of 1900, residents in the Gorbals were gripped by panic as symptoms of the bubonic plague began to clutch the throat of the desperate community. The crowded and unsanitary conditions, coupled with the proliferation of filthy rats, ensured a significant portion of the population succumbed to the ravages of the disease. As Glasgow's heavy industry gradually fell into decline as a result, unemployment rose, leading to an increase in crime and debauchery. This, however, did little to halt the continuous influx of migrants seeking refuge in the dilapidating district. By the 1940s, approximately 40,000 people called the Gorbals their home, a steep contrast compared to a 2015 census claiming it was now home to only 6,000 residents. These grim living conditions undeniably played a pivotal role in compelling the children of the Gorbals to envision such horrors to be abundant in their daily lives. But can we attribute the entirety of the blame to their environment alone? While the cacophony of heavy iron, fiery blazes, and the noxious chemicals certainly exerted a profound influence on the young minds seeking an escape, these conditions alone would not have been solely responsible for their belief in a prowling vampire. So, what other factors might have contributed? It appears there is no shortage of a diverse array of local myths featuring boogeymen that could have easily influenced the impressionable minds, leading them to believe such creatures could truly exist. For instance, parents at the time often invoked the name of Jenny with the Iron Teeth, a ghastly figure rumored to roam the city in the 1800s, seeking disobedient children to devour if they refused to go to bed. There's even a schoolyard rhyme about her, though seeing how I don't have a Scottish accent and it's impossible to sing the rhyme without one, I'll simply leave you guys to explore and attempt it on your own. Nevertheless, the children perceived her as a very real monster with iron teeth. A common thread then emerges between Jenny and the Gorbals Vampire: the significance of iron when describing something utterly terrifying. This association likely stems from the distinct fear the children harbored towards the nearby iron foundry that made such commotion and left their environment so bleak. Though, even after establishing this compelling connection, there might be another influence that helped shape the image of the blood-sucking antagonist. Coincidentally, an American comic book titled Dark Mysteries printed an issue released a year prior containing a 6-page story titled The Vampire with the Iron Teeth. Now, it's entirely plausible that a child had acquired a copy at some point, shared the horror-filled narrative with their peers, and triggered a volatile chain reaction, leading to hundreds of children to believe an iron-toothed vampire haunted the necropolis. Some who heard the story second or third hand from friends or siblings may have misinterpreted or misunderstood that it was merely a work of fiction, yet genuinely believed the antagonist to be real and living in the neighborhood. Though the likelihood of a young child in the Gorbals stumbling upon this specific issue of Dark Mysteries was quite slim. Most families lacked the disposable income necessary for such frivolous purchases, and the limited means of entertainment such as television were scarce. And to be honest, many children in the district didn't even grasp the concept of what a vampire was during that time. In later interviews with those who had participated in the hunt as children, most individuals admitted they were simply caught up in the notion that a monster lurked in the area and were there to put an end to it. The proper methods to defeat a vampire or an understanding of its behavior were entirely lost on them. All of them simply believed in a shared threat and aimed to eradicate it. These such hunts were not particularly rare either, which helps contribute an understanding of why this event had unfolded in the first place. With the amalgamation of influence within the Gorbals, there were ample mythical creatures for the children to pursue. Glasgow's history features a number of intriguing monster hunts. One such included when children embarked on a hunt for hobgoblins rumored to reside in the Cowkiddens neighborhood in the 1870s. Approaching the 20th century, classic paranormal pursuits targeting dreadful spirits, frightening ghosts, and mournful banshees also played a pivotal role in occupying young minds. Even the phantom Spring-Heeled Jack, a Victorian fire-breathing figure known for haunting London in 1837, became a subject for one of the many imaginative hunts enacted by the children of Glasgow. Such activities were relatively harmless. Children would gather in various locations after learning or hearing whispers of an unnatural adversary threatening their existence. The enthusiastic curiosity surrounding such endeavors offered the younger generations an opportunity to explore and cultivate their fascinations with the world around them, while also distancing themselves from such a bleak environment. However, not everyone viewed these antics with approval. It appeared that the search for the Gorbals Vampire might have been the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. The media frenzy that ensued made the panic in Glasgow abundantly clear, prompting several individuals to seek an end to such events once and for all. A coalition of concerned parents, religious figures, and a select few who were determined to curb the spread of American influence in the United Kingdom participated in a crusade against outlets of entertainment similar to those that may have helped fuel the entire incident. In 1955, Alice Cullen, the Member of Parliament representing Glasgow's Gorbals district, emerged as the leading force in the campaign to suppress any form of horror-related entertainment. Under her direction, the Children and Young Persons Harmful Publications Act of 1955 specifically targeted publications criminalizing the printing, publishing, or selling of comic books depicting crimes, acts of violence or cruelty, or incidents of a repulsive or horrible nature. Essentially, the legislation banned horror because folks were getting too scared. The powers that be believed that by removing the influence the comics had on young minds, events like the hunt for the Gorbals Vampire would gradually fade into obscurity. In contrast to its earlier days of moral panic that gripped the neighborhood, the tale of the vampire hunt now holds a special place in the hearts of those who call the Gorbals their home. Residents, especially those who participated in the chilly September hunts, fondly reminisce to this day about the camaraderie and excitement they shared while searching for their supernatural foe. Despite the absence of any real monster, except for the one which nested in the vivid imaginations of the fear-stricken locals, this unique case of mass hysteria has left an indelible mark on the community. It continues to stand as a peculiar yet cherished memory, a perfect concoction born from a blend of myth and reality that gave rise to those frightful nights in the Gorbals back in the autumn of 1954. Thank you all so much for listening to this incredibly fascinating tale of mass hysteria leading to an unprecedented event that no one could have ever expected. I found it interesting how many young children from a variety of ages participated in such a daring objective. But as I had mentioned, the existing myths that already thrived in the streets of Glasgow, combined with the dark and dreary environment, would certainly allow imaginations to run wild. It was likely only a matter of time before a hunt of that scale would unfold, and thanks to it, I was able to share this fantastic story with you all. So if you enjoyed this episode and you feel like you might want to support the show and help it grow, leaving a 5-star review on whatever app you might be listening on right now goes a long way in helping out. It shows people that this is a show liked by many and is worth listening to. However, maybe you've already done this and you are looking for ways to help the show even more. Well, the absolute best way one can help in growing the show is by sharing it amongst your friends and family, or by sharing it on social media. Not only does this draw in new listeners, but it also helps the show appear more frequently in search engines on the web as well. Then, of course, if you've done both of those things and are still looking to become one of my #1 fans, donating to the Patreon is a surefire way to make sure the podcast is a success. There's a lot that goes into making the show, from time it takes to research, write, record, and edit, to costs like equipment, hosting fees, and website costs. If you want to help me out with managing these things, for only as low as $5 a month, you can become a Patreon subscriber on the Moonlight Lore Patreon, and also gain access to a bunch of awesome episodes that have never been released on the main feed before. In the latest one, I tell a 1-hour story of a hiking disaster that took place in Germany. It was definitely an episode I really enjoyed putting together. Also, a very special thank you to my friend Giovanna, who signed up for the $25 tier. I especially appreciate that. Apologies for this episode coming out a little bit later than I had wanted it to. I ended up house sitting last weekend, so I wasn't around to record this episode or do too much of anything regarding the podcast, so unfortunately it just got delayed a bit. The next episode should come out on time, unless something happens that just stops me from doing it, but I don't think there's anything coming up. So you should fully expect a new episode to come out in 2 weeks, I think. I'll keep you guys posted though. At any rate, I do hope you enjoyed this one, and that it was worth the wait. Thank you again for listening, and as always, take care of yourselves as we creep slowly towards winter, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care, everyone.